What's up, y'all? Want to welcome you back to the HuntStand podcast, season 2, and this is your host, Will Cooper. The HuntStand podcast is your weekly source for insightful conversations with veteran hunters, dedicated outdoor enthusiasts, and top industry personnel. I'm going to have guests on here who are true experts in their field, delving into the captivating world of our industry and the great outdoors. With each episode, you, the listener, are going to be able to receive invaluable knowledge, tips, and guidance on how to enhance your skills in the wild and even in life. So tune in weekly to be entertained, informed, and driven to reach new heights. So what does that mean? That means you need to make sure that you do whatever you got to do to make sure that you get notifications weekly whenever I put a new HuntStand podcast up, because you're not going to want to miss out on the guests and people that I bring on here to bring all this to you. The HuntStand podcast is brought to you by Yamaha and its full line of class-defining, adventure-seeking motorcycles, ATVs, and side-by-side vehicles. The HuntStand podcast is also brought to you by Springfield Armory and their Model 2020 Waypoint rifles. HuntStand podcast, season 2. Buckle up. It's going to be a good ride. Let's go. What's up, y'all? It's your host, Will, coming back for season 2. Episode 1. To kick off this year, we're going to be posting weekly episodes on Wednesday afternoons. I know I'm changing up on y'all a little bit, but we're going to do Wednesday afternoons, and then we're still going to do Field Note Fridays, but we're not going to be doing them every Friday. We're just going to be doing them seasonally. So we're going to be doing it turkey season. We'll probably do it when elk kicks in, and then of course we're going to be doing all whitetail season long. So we just want to thank all of y'all again for the massive amount of support we got for season 1. I'm excited for season 2, and to kick off season 2, what we're going to be doing through February and into March before turkey season kicks off, we're going to be doing a little series that we're going to coin Wildest Hunt Stories Ever. Now, what this is going to entail is we're going to have people on here that are going to talk about near-death experiences, crazy wild game experiences, dangerous game, or whatever kind of story that they're going to have. But we want to bring that to y'all just to kind of change things up. So, I mean, of course, we're going to sit down with them and we're going to have, if you will, campfire talk time, and we're just going to shoot the BS with them about these crazy stories and just listen in, because a lot of people have some awesome stories and I want to have this platform to tell those stories. So we're going to have that here to talk about that. And of course, we're going to learn a little bit too along the way about how their perspective changed from these wild stories, whether they were near death, wild, crazy game, dangerous game, whatever it was. So who are we going to get on for this first episode? Well, let me tell you, we're going to bring on the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Fred Eichler. So for those of y'all that know Fred, you know he is a very decorated bow hunter with his recurve, compounds. He's a rifle guy too, but you know him specifically on his bow hunting achievements. And for those of you that don't know Fred, then what you ought to know is that he is the first person to take all 29 North American big game animals with a recurve bow and complete the Super Slam. I'm excited to get Fred on here today because of a few different things. You know, not only are we just going to talk wildest hunting stories with him, we're going to talk about a few different stories and things that he has been through. And specifically, we're going to talk about a time that he was bit by an alligator in the leg, and he's had a very close encounter with leopard and brown bears. And so we're going to talk to Fred about that and just kind of pick his mind on what was going through his head when this happened. But I'm not going to dive into too much about the stories because I don't want to ruin it for you guys. So I'm going to quit rambling and I'm going to let Fred take it from here. But again, y'all, if you haven't yet, download the HuntStand app. We've got the free version, we got the pro version, and then new this past fall in 2022, we launched our version called the Pro Whitetail tier. So you can get the free, you can upgrade to Pro, and if you want to unlock all the features of HuntStand, upgrade to Pro Whitetail today. Again, y'all, we just want to thank y'all for tuning in to the HuntStand podcast. We really appreciate the support that we got from y'all. Season 1, unbelievable. You've got a lot of different choices out there for podcasts. You got thousands of different options, and so thank you for tuning in. And if this is the first time you're tuning into the HuntStand podcast, we just want to say thank you. I'm gonna quit rambling, and here's our man, Fred Eichler, Season 2, Episode 1 of the HuntStand podcast. Fred, you ready to get this thing rolling?
I'm ready to roll, buddy.
All right. Well, Fred, first and foremost, just want to thank you for hopping on the HuntStand podcast with me today and just taking the time to talk hunting with me, man.
Oh, of course, Will. I'm excited to be on with you.
Absolutely, man. It's, watching you growing up, watching you hunt on the outdoor shows and everything. It's pretty cool to get to sit down with you today and just talk. And specifically, we're going to talk wildest hunting stories. But before we do that, what I like to do to introduce the guest to all the listeners, there's a lot of people out there that probably know who you are already, but those that may not, kind of give us what I call the 30-foot tree stand view of yourself, who you are, where you're at, and kind of how you've gotten to where you are in life now.
Man, well, my name's Fred Eichler, and heck, just a lucky guy like a lot of people out there. I'm doing what I love to do. I run an outfitting business. I get to spend the majority of my time outdoors. I also have a small cattle operation and a hay business. We work cattle, and then, we have a little commercial hay operation where we sell some hay. So pretty much everything I do kind of revolves around the outdoors. We have a Instagram page and, do a TV show, and that's about it. But he just lucky, nothing big and huge. Just a guy doing what he loves to do.
Man, you can't complain about that, can you?
No, sir. No, I don't complain much.
There you go. Well, man, we're going to talk wildest hunting stories, right? And I know you and I kind of had a phone call before to kind of talk about a few that you've been through in some hairy situations, man. So tell us about some of these wildest hunting experiences that you've been through, man.
Well, it's kind of funny because, the people that influence your life, but Chuck Adams, harvested all 29 species in North America, and he named it the Super Slam.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, what an incredible thing to do. Like, that to me was the Everest of bow hunting. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I wonder if I'm tough enough and if I have both the mental, capabilities and the physical capabilities to try and achieve something like that. But I wanted to do it a little different. I wanted to do it with a recurve bow. I just thought that would be kind of neat. And along the way, I had no idea some of the crazy adventures and scary situations I would get myself into. And during that, I've been hotter than I've ever been. Hunting desert sheep in Mexico where we ran out of water, and, climbing and rappelling rocks. And I've been colder than I've ever been. -30, hunting polar bears, sleeping in an igloo. So,
jeez.
There's been some pretty crazy adventures. But it's the funny ones, I guess. And I say funny, but the ones that really added a little extra pucker factor are when things didn't quite go right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true with any hunt. Right? Well, you remember the ones that don't go right as much as you do the ones that ones that do. So, I had told you about some of the crazy things and the plane crashes and the boat flips and the horse wrecks and some of the different things I've been involved in. But, the ones that really come to mind, for example, I was hunting alligator with a buddy, and we were down in Florida. We were having an absolute blast, and we were trapping alligators. My buddy was an alligator trapper, and I had shot some with a bow. And we were in this super fancy neighborhood, and we were in town. And my buddy gets this call at like 5 a.m. Hey, there's an alligator, on this line bouncing around in front of my house. So he's like, man, we got to get up. I know we've only slept 2 hours. We've been up all night chasing alligators, but this lady's got a alligator hanging off one of my lines. I've got to go get to it. So I'm like, okay, no sweat. I'll go with you. I'll help you out.
Yeah.
So we take off, we go over there, and here's a very agitated alligator. Problem is, it's in the city limits in Florida, in this little town we're at. And this lady had apparently called a bunch of her friends. So now there's a whole bunch of moms out there with video cameras and cell phones, and they're videoing the alligator trappers. They're going to go grab this alligator. So my buddy's like, okay, let's get this gator. And he says, Fred, normally I would just shoot it or, give it the old hatchet behind the head, but we're in town, we're on camera. This is not the best place to do this. So, we're just going to have to wrap this gator up. So we literally grab the alligator and tie its front feet. We tie its back feet. We tie its mouth up with tape. And one of the ladies goes, there's the other one. And this alligator pops up right next to shore, just bloop, and he's floating along. So my buddy says, quick, run and grab my rod. So I grab a rod with a big treble hook. I throw it, or he throws it out there. catches it. Then he hands it to me. He's like, fight this gator up the shore, and then we're going to have to jump on it. I'm like, what? He's like, we're going to have to get on this alligator because we've got to get this one too. So we get the alligator up, we jump on this one, and we hold it down, and we tape its mouth, tape its legs, and everything's great. We have 2 very angry live alligators, but everything was smooth. So my buddy says to the owner of this house, he says, ma'am, can I back my truck up here? I need to go ahead and load these alligators up. Oh no, not across my manicured lawn. You can't drive that big jacked up truck down to the pond. It'll leave ruts in the grass. So my buddy's like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to drag these alligators up this hill, to my truck. So we're both exhausted. We're not really thinking, but we grab these alligators and we're dragging them. Well, we're dragging them by their hind legs and their tail so they don't hit you with the tail. Well, as we're dragging them, we're dragging their mouths where the tape is. Ooh. And we're not really thinking about that part of it. But we get the alligators back, load them up my buddy's truck, go back to his place. We lay the alligators on the ground because, as far as we know, they're all trussed up. And I'm actually walking there's a dead alligator right here, and I'm walking along the side of a live one or the side of a dead one that I'd got the night before, because my buddy said, man, I think that alligator is going to go 11 foot. And one of the live ones was on the other side of it. So I'm walking along the dead one, and one of the live ones, who was the only alligator that realized that his mouth was not taped anymore and he had slipped his front legs free, jumps over the back of a dead, and the width on it was it's a wide, big alligator, jumps over it and grabs me by the knee.
Oh, shit.
So I've been lucky. I've had all kinds of crazy experiences, and I'll tell you about some of the grizzly bears and brown bears and leopard charges. But, I've lived this little kind of charmed life. I've been involved in plane crashes, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And nothing's ever actually got me. I've been close on a lot of stuff, but this alligator has got me by the knee, and he is just thrashing. And I'll have to send you the pictures of it so you can see that I'm not exaggerating how badly my leg was torn up. But ends up, this alligator's thrashing. I kneel down to keep it from breaking my leg. I don't want this alligator to roll and break my leg. And I cannot open his mouth. I literally, I'm trying as hard as I can. I can't open his jaws. And finally, the alligator, and the only way I can describe it, Will, is that when you're playing with a dog, it went to get another bite. It took to get another, I'm going to rebite. And when it did that, I was able to get my leg out. Well, then it was a miracle that my buddies didn't shoot me, because guns were everywhere. And these guys shoot this alligator to pieces and asking me if I'm okay.
Holy crap.
I sit down. I end up going out. I am woozy. I can feel blood inside my leg. I'm dizzy. I've just been fighting with an alligator. I sit down and I'm like, hey. So I go out. I come to, my buddies are like, man, the ambulance is coming. It looks really bad. It's bad. And I'm like, great. So they rush me to the hospital, get to the hospital, and I'm trying to kind of make it quick, but I get to the hospital. And when I arrive, I find out that an alligator is the most septic bite there is.
Seriously.
Just so you know, Will, you would rather get bit by pretty much anything. A dog, a rattlesnake, a raccoon, a badger, almost anything in the country you would rather get bitten by. An alligator has the most septic bite because they live in stagnant water and they eat rotten food. So the amount of bacteria in an alligator's mouth has caused all kinds of people to lose limbs. They're like, you could lose your whole leg. The doctor wasn't even he wasn't even he's like, we're going to have to rush you in. We're going to have to operate on the tendons and ligaments and muscle that's torn. But we've really got to get you juiced up with all these antibiotics because this is the most septic bite. And here's what we're worried about. And I'm like, awesome. So, when I show you the pictures, you're going to freak out. So I'm going to send you the pictures.
Okay.
But it was really bad. So, fortunately, great doctor does, amazing job. They juiced me for all these antibiotics. And I was at Shands Hospital in Gainesville, Florida, which is a teaching hospital. Mm-hmm. So the next day, I wake up and I've got stitches, inside, outside, both sides of my leg because the alligator had it like this. And the doctor comes in and says, hey, this is a teaching hospital and we have doctors and nurses. Do you mind if I bring them in to, kind of show them what I did and the damage that an alligator caused to a leg? So I said, yeah, whatever. I'm sitting there drugged up, whatever you want to do. Yeah. So in walks a troop of nurses, doctors, just younger people that are learning to become doctors and nurses. Mm-hmm. And it's very clinical. I'm laying there in the bed. It's kind of awkward. He's got the sheet pulled back and he's got a little red pointer. And he's like, well, here's where the alligator did this. And here's where I surgery, and I did this to this tendon. And he's kind of going over the whole 9 yards. And I'm sitting there just thinking how awkward it is and how, it's a drag is, and, am I going to, how much is it going to pack me riding horses or hiking or, I'm worried about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the nurses says, do you mind? Because he asked questions and they're asking the doctor questions about, what kind of thread and what kind of knot, all this other mumbo jumbo. But the funny part is one of the nurses asked the doctor, she goes, do you mind if I ask the patient? Now I'm sitting right here, Will. I can hear her asking the doctor if she can ask me. So it's just awkward, but I guess that's protocol. But she says, can I ask the patient how it was that the alligator bit him? Now understand, my buddy is standing in the hospital room with me. Okay. My alligator trap buddy standing right next to me in the bed. Well, he's not in the bed. I'm in the bed. He's standing next to me. And the doctor looks at me and he goes, sir, is it okay? And I'm like, yeah. I said, I don't mind telling you, but I've had a minute to think about it. So instead of telling the real story, I decide that I'm going to ad lib a little bit. So I said, well, it was horrible. I said, there was a canoe full of children in this lake.
Oh, God.
And when it rolled over, and I'm telling it, and you should have seen them. Every one of them are like, they're like, oh my gosh. I said, it was horrible. I said, I swam out and I'm grabbing these kids and I'm taking them to shore. And I said, I had the last kid and I'm almost to shore. I said, when the alligator got me, and every one of them are just like, and they're looking at me like I'm just a hero. And it was amazing for a second of my life to feel like that. Like I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like, look at how they're even looking at me. Even the guys were all like, this guy's a hero. I mean, holy cow. But my buddy can't stand it because I'm getting all this attention and he knows I'm lying. And he's like, he just couldn't stand it. And he goes, literally interrupts me. Imagine how uncomfortable this was. There's a doctor, nurses, and people that are studying to be doctors. And my buddy goes, mid-story, that's a lie. And everybody stopped. And even I'm like, oh no. And he's like, that's not what happened at all. He's like, no, I'm an alligator trapper. So he kind of trying to turn the attention onto him. So he's like, I'm an alligator trapper. We were hunting. And as soon as he had said hunting, I pretty much lost my audience, and it was really awkward for everybody. And they all kind of left the room. But yeah, that's my alligator attack story.
How long ago was that?
That was probably now 7 to 8 years ago.
How long did it take you to recover from that?
It took a while. I still can feel it's a little looser in there than it was.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, I get along pretty good. A lot of time in the saddle probably hurts it more than anything because, my legs just, your knees twisted a little bit.
Yeah.
But, it's not, fortunately, it didn't. The doctor did a great job because it didn't cause me as much damage as I was worried about. The great news is, of course, I didn't lose anything. They really had me super concerned about the bacteria, and that's why they handled it the way they did. But you do not want to get bit by an alligator. I mean, they were telling stories about people getting bit in the finger and losing an arm. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, it's the worst bacteria you can release into your system. And, as far as an animal bite goes. So I was a little wigged out about it, but, it ended up, like I said, that's my funny ending on that whole thing. Cause I kind of cut up and made it into a little bit of a funny story, but I'll send you a couple pictures of it and you'll see it wasn't really a laughing matter when it happened.
No,
it wasn't a monster alligator. The one that got me was probably about 7 feet. Now I had killed an 11-footer the night before, and had that gotten me, there'd have been nothing I could do. But that one, even a 7-footer, it was all I could do to keep from, not only going down, but it tore me up pretty good through a thick pair of, pants.
Jeez, man. What, I know you kind of, as he's biting your leg, you're kind of thinking, you're talking about how you knelt down so he couldn't tear you up even worse. But when that first happened, what was the thought that went through your mind as soon as that booger grabbed your leg?
Man, well, it's funny. It's funny because it's embarrassing tuu, because I always, you like to think you're going to be that brave guy. If something happens, you'll just, I can handle. Dude, I was like, I wasn't ready for it. I was squalling like a stuck pig, buddy. It had me. I do remember, I had enough presence of mind that even though not only it hitting me and jolting me, I knew I didn't want to go down. I was like, man, if I go down and I'm at the same level, I was really worried about, the next bite might be here or, breaking my leg. So I was really worried. I did not want the alligator to be able to roll, which it was trying to do. And it's why my leg got ripped up. But I'll show, I'll send you the pictures. It's pretty gory.
I'll have to see those. I'll definitely have to.
So it was crazy.
We've talked alligator bite. You're on a hunt trip down there, and you've kind of alluded to a grizzly bear situation.
So, I'm going to move to the whole opposite side of the country. So that was in Florida. So now this next crazy experience happened up in Alaska, and it was on a brown bear hunt, and it was a awesome area, and it was one of those really remote areas, Will, that you're just. It's. When you think of Alaska, that's exactly what you think about, because we took a float plane, outside of Talkeetna, went into this remote little, lake, flew in on float plane, landed. We had a raft that was totally collapsed with us. We drug that out of the plane. We had a little foot pump. My outfitter, Braun, we fill up this raft with a foot pump, air it up, and then we paddled into this tiny little. It was more of a creek, really. You couldn't really call it a river. I don't even think it was named, but this little creek that had salmon loaded up in it. And then we were going to take this creek and just, go with the flow of the creek miles, like 15, 20 miles to where it hit up with another main river. Then we were going to float down that to a big sandbar where a plane was going to pick us up, 10 days later. So I love those remote hunts. I love the adventure of it. And the guy I was with was an awesome hunter. He's got a great reputation. And Braun and me were in the boat. I had a cameraman right behind me directly over me, but we were on the left side of the boat.
Yeah.
On the right side of the boat, in the front right, was Braun. And I'm telling you all this because it's on YouTube if people want to check it out, or if you want to check it out. And behind Braun was another hunter that was from Illinois. All our gear was jammed in the middle of this little raft. So not only was all our gear, I don't bring a handgun generally. I do now, but I didn't used to bring a handgun at all. And I just had my recurve, and that's all I needed. But even my recurve was down. So all the gear's there. The only person with a firearm was the outfitter. And he was carrying a 500 Smith & Wesson in a holster. Well, it was so packed on this raft that we were sitting, everybody was on one, pontoon with one leg tucked into the water. Like you folded it up along the edge of the raft, and we were paddling because we had all our gear in the middle. So we were on these pontoons. Well, we hadn't been too far into our adventure, and I looked up, and I was all excited because I spotted the first bear. I was like, oh, there's a brown bear. And almost instantly my buddy goes, oh, it's got cubs with it. And I hadn't even seen the cubs right off the bat. But the funny thing is, Will, and you being down in Texas, you probably spent some time on water, canoeing or kayak, things like that. So here's our raft, and we're going straight down the river. Well, when you see something like that, like, oh, there's a brown bear, what do you think everybody stops doing?
Rowing.
You got it.
Paddling.
You got it. Everybody, including me, we all stop paddling. But the outfitter, everybody, we take our paddles out of the water, and everybody's staring at this brown bear. Now, we're floating, and the water is taking us closer to the brown bear, who's right here on shore.
Oh, crap.
Now, this huge sow sees us. She has 3 cubs, and the sow does exactly what she's supposed to do in that situation. She tries to avoid a bad encounter. The sow takes off into the brush. The problem is her 3 cubs have probably never seen their mother run from anything. They've never seen a raft. They've never seen people. they're curious. So even though mom ran off and we could hear her trying to call the cubs don't go anywhere. So now here's the horrible situation. Maybe you can tell me what you would do. The bear, so imagine, let's see, the bear's here. Well, I guess it'd be reversed for you. So the bear's right here.
Uh-huh.
The raft's going, and the raft, since nobody's paddling, starts turning. And it starts turning to where I am the closest to the bear. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So as it's turning and the water's taking us, I'm closest to these 3 cubs. Well, Bron waves his hand like, get out of here, trying to scare the cubs to join their mother. Well, at that same time, we hear what sounds like a locomotive in the brush, just, and we know it's the sow, but we can't imagine that she's going to charge. But all of a sudden, she comes and she's running at us so hard, she literally runs over one of her cubs. So if you check out the video on YouTube, she literally runs over one of the cubs to where the cub has to dive out of the way. And she is coming across the water. And it's shallow water. I mean, it's not that deep. Mm-hmm. She's plowing across the water right at us. And that was probably one of my scariest encounters in the field, because it wasn't, in my mind, the first thing you think of is like, oh, I'm dead. I mean, this is a huge bear and there's nothing that's going to stop her. She is about to eat us. So the crazy thing is, Bron, and it's so neat, and I've watched the video a million times, and granted, this was years and years ago, and if you watch the video, you'll be like, wow, that's not Fred, that's before he had gray hair. But he pulls this 500 Smith & Wesson hog leg out, and it is all he can do to cock and fire, like in one motion. And he shoots right in front of this bear. And the water, imagine the gases from a 500 Smith & Wesson. I mean, a lot. Shooting it towards you, and the gases and all the blowback. So he shoots, and when he shoots, it hits the water right in front of it. And this huge brown bear, at about near as we could figure 6 feet. I mean, that's close on a full charging brown bear. She turns. And what's interesting, if you watch the video, especially if you watch it slow-mo or frame by frame, she turned, but as she's running away at about 15 feet, she turns all the way back and looks at us to make sure we're not getting closer to the cubs. So that freaked me out too, because it was wow, this is a little spooky. He shot, and then I have instant relief, and then I see her turn and look back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to come again. Well, fortunately, the river carried us past the cubs, and she didn't charge again. But we played this on Easton Bow Hunting TV. Mm-hmm. And here's an interesting part. People ask all the time, hey, I saw that show, or I saw this, I saw that. What, is there any stuff that, that doesn't get into the show? Is there any stuff that, maybe doesn't get aired? Or I'm going to tell you what didn't get aired on this show. So immediately after the charge, we're all freaked out. Yeah. Okay. Freaked out. My cameraman's like, I think I got that. And I'm like, what? I didn't think, in my mind, there's no way we got anything. But he said, Fred, I was up and running when you first said there's a brown bear. So he's behind me with the camera on a bouncing raft. And he said, so I turned the camera on. He said, I didn't realize what was happening until I heard the gunshot. So it all happened so fast that he didn't really have time to get scared and drop the camera. It was like, whoa, there's a gunshot. And he turned, and then it all went. And I was like, there's no way. He's like, no, I think I got the whole thing. So ends up we did. And that's what, what made some incredible TV. But the part we didn't show, we sent the footage into Easton, of course, Easton arrows. And at the time they were making Easton bats and Easton hockey sticks and all that stuff. Right after the charge, Bron, my guide, is messing with this handgun. He's kind of bent over and he's messing around with it. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, nothing. And I'm asking him questions. I'm like, why didn't you kill the bear? And he's like, Fred, and I'm like freaked out. I'm like, dude, if there was ever an occasion to kill a bear, that was it. That bear was 6 feet from me. Why didn't you just kill it? Like, I do not understand why you risked shooting in front of a bear that close. Like, I would have shot it. And Braun, and it was really neat. And this is a guy that's been charged a lot, so he knows. But he said, Fred, in that situation, it wasn't a bluff charge. She was coming, he said, and that bear was going to jump in the boat and you were closest and she was going to start mauling you and probably would have mauled everybody in the boat. He said, I had two options. He said, getting away wasn't an option. He said, the other option, he said, was to shoot and try and kill her. He said, or to shoot and try and turn her. He said, the problem with a mother bear, and as angry as she was, had I shot and hit her anywhere, he said, even if I'd have shot her in the chest, she would have felt that as an attack, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And she would have jumped on you, you know what I mean? And she would have mauled us all until she died. He said, the only other shot I could have made on that bear to stop the charge instantly was to shoot her in the head or the spinal cord. And he said, the odds of me hitting a charging brown bear in a bouncing boat, you know what I mean, with a handgun to hit it in the head or the spinal cord, almost zero. He said, so shooting the bear wasn't really the best option. He said, so my plan was to shoot in front of the bear, hope that it turned her, almost like a skunk, you know what I mean? So we could resituate, we could regroup, the boat's moving, maybe it'll turn her. He said, and surprisingly, it did. And I said, well, what was your plan? And he said, well, my next shot, and while he's talking to me, Will, he's messing with his handgun.
Yeah.
And he said, Fred, with the next shot, I was going to shoot the bear off you at very close range and try and put a fatal shot on it. But then you got all kinds of concerns because you don't want to shoot the person. You know what I mean? You want to shoot the bear, blah, blah, blah. It's all this stuff. Meanwhile, he's still messing with the gun. Now, my cameraman's videoing all this. Okay. He's running the camera while Blonde explains why he did what he did. Now, I've watched the footage, and Braun is either the coolest customer in the world, and he did exactly like he explained to me. He methodically thought all that in a flash of a second, shot in front of the bear, turned it, and saved the day. Or he's just full of it, and he totally was scared, tried to shoot the bear, missed it, and came up with a great excuse on the fly, which was impressive too, really. I was like, because I've watched the video, and I'm like, man, that's incredible either way. But what's crazy is the gun ended up jamming. This is 500 Smith & Wesson revolver. Now it's jammed because I said, what's going on with the gun? And he goes, I don't know. I can't cock the gun. And I said, what are you talking about? Revolvers don't jam. That's why people shoot revolvers.
Yeah.
I don't understand. What do you mean the gun's jammed? And he literally is like, I don't know. I can't cock it. He said, I tried to cock it as soon as I shot and it wouldn't cock. And I'm like, what? The gun that you were going to shoot the bear off of me, the gun that, you took the first shot in the water, then you were going to save my life and everybody's life in the boat. You can't fire the gun? And he's like, no, I don't know what's going on. We literally pulled the boat over because now we have to figure out what's going on with the handgun. Now I'm going to tell you one of the only ways you can jam a revolver. So he was shooting souped up reloads. Okay. That somebody had made for him. I say souped up because they were overly charged, because what happened is the primer had backed out of the shell casing. Now, the firing pin on a lot of revolvers is located on the hammer.
Right.
So the hammer, when it fired the round, the primer backed out of the shell casing and the firing pin got stuck in the primer. So the cylinder would not rotate. We had literally done one of the very few things you could do to jam a revolver. And it was stuck good enough that you couldn't just pull it out. So we literally had to sit there with a penknife and mess and play, and finally freed it out. Had to take the gun out. And so we sent this footage in because to me, that was a pretty crazy part of the story.
Yeah.
I'm like, the revolver jammed. So Easton sends me the show and it doesn't have any of that. And I'm like, why don't you have the part about the gun jamming? Like, that's incredible. And they said, well, here's the problem. If we show that, that's one of Smith & Wesson's most popular self-defense weapons.
Oh, shoot.
Like, people buy that for exactly that situation.
Yeah.
So if we show that the gun had problems, we're then going to have to explain why it had problems. And the gun wouldn't have had any problems had they been using factory rounds or had the guy reloaded properly and the primer not backed out of the casing. So we would have to burn up so much of the show trying to explain that it wasn't the revolver's fault. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It wasn't a faulty revolver, because this is a revolver people rely on in situations like this, or life and death situations to save their life.
Yeah.
So I was like, So here we had this big, to me, crazy part that had that bear either A, kept coming, or B, when it turned around to look at us, because it literally turns fully around and looks right at us, had it recharged, we couldn't have done a thing. So pretty interesting to me that whole scenario was nuts because of multiple reasons. But one of the things that I think is craziest to me about it is how many things could have gone wrong. But I also think about what would have happened if we were fly fishermen. What would have happened if Braun wouldn't reacted as quickly as he did? Mm-hmm. That could have been anybody going down there, and that would have been a bear attack situation where people were either killed, mauled in the wilderness. Wouldn't have been easy to get out. So there was a lot of things that could have gone wrong there. Everything went right. But it was just it was another one of those crazy stories. Jeez. And we have it on video. So if you ever get a chance, check out Fred Bear, brown bear attack. A Fred Bear charged by grizzly. It's a brown bear, but I think they might have put it up as grizzly. But it's pretty crazy. But if you watch the slow-mo, you can see exactly. Sometimes I hear stories from people. I'm like, I wonder if it really went down like that, or you know what I mean? Is that guy embellishing? You can watch the YouTube, compare what I was just saying to you, and you'll see, except for the revolver having jammed, you'll be able to see kind of exactly what happened there. It's a pretty spooky situation.
Jeez, how? I'm sure you did you have bear encounters before that at all? Any kind of like bluff charges?
Not on that trip. I have encountered some other bears and had some pretty crazy encounters with other animals. I think I've told you I've been charged by leopards. I've had some encounters by some crazy other animals. But as far as probably one of my closer calls with a big, large apex predator, that would probably be that, and the leopard would probably be right up there, because that was a pretty intimidating situation with an animal that's just so big, and it's just not scared of anything. I mean, they're just large bears.
Now, I know you're a guy that respects animals, and you respect, obviously big, powerful predators like that, but did your perspective of bears change at all after that encounter? Any way that you just kind of looked at them from there?
That is a great question. Well, I've never been asked that. But that's a great question. And yes, I think it made me feel naive about how I had handled other bear encounters previously. Once I realized the fury and the speed that a predator that big can have, I mean, I guess you always think you're going to have a minute to react. I always thought you'll see it coming, or you'll do something, or, it can happen so fast that you really can't really be prepared for it. And there's situations where people have, sadly people have been killed by bears. Joggers have been killed. Hikers have been killed. People in Yellowstone, there's all kinds of situations but in the past, a lot of those situations I looked at and thought, person probably didn't know what they were doing. I could have handled it better. And it made me go, nope. Because I would have for sure been mauled, if not killed, had Braun not been there. So when I think of like a hiker or a jogger, I mean, to your question again, when I think of a hiker, a jogger, another hunter, I think about all the times I've had other bear encounters where I just didn't realize that, man, a bear can cover that 30 to 50 yards in the flash of an eye, and you would never get an arrow knocked. You would never, there's really situations where there's nothing you could do. And like I said, it kept coming. Braun really, it's all he can do. If you end up watching the video, it's all he can do. And we were ready. That wasn't even a situation where we didn't know we were kind of in danger because of the cubs. There's situations where you don't even know the cubs are there and a bear just charges you out of the blue.
Yeah.
You'd have no time for anything. But even knowing and having an experienced guide and outfitter, Braun already had his hand close to his gun, and you'll see it's literally everything he can do to just get it out and pull off one shot. And it was already 6 feet away when he did that. So it's pretty, that's a great question. Yeah, it did. It changed my opinion a lot. It changed how I think about bears. It changed the respect I give them, in other encounters I've had since then on Kodiak Island, Alaska, even with my boys where I'm like, hey, don't play around with this. That bear's in the willows. And yeah, it's 80 yards away, but it's showing interest in us. We're going to stand in the open. We're facing our rifles that direction. And we're going to see what happens because that bear can cover that. You turn your back on that bear or that bear slips around on us. So it's changed. That's a great question, but it has changed my respect. And also I'm more cautious around those big predators.
When y'all first encountered this bear, I'll backtrack a little bit to, you get bit by this alligator and you talked about, it's just mayhem, everything's going nuts. But when you see this bear and her cubs, how were your nerves? I mean, how were you able to keep a thread of calmness, if you will, while this encounter's happening?
I guess because I didn't know, and that probably happens so many times to people. I didn't realize how bad it was going to turn and how quickly. It was more of a interesting, like, wow, cool. I saw the bear first. You know what I mean? That's neat. And, oh, wow, there's 3 brown bear cubs. How cool is that? Because the mother left. It would have been totally different. Well, had the mother stayed there on the bank, had the boat been drifting closer to the mother and her cubs, but the mother disappeared. She literally went, I'm out. You know what I mean? Like, and tried to call her cubs with her. She literally was calling, like trying to get the cubs to join her. And then it would have been a big nothing burger. She would have just, they would have followed and it would have been nothing. But the cubs caused the issue because the cubs stayed. And, the mother obviously either could see through the brush or sense us getting closer to them. And that's what drove her nuts. And so that's a good question, but I wasn't nervous at the time. It was, oh, cool. There's 3 cubs and the mother's gone. And I'm sure the cubs will run any second. Well, not only did the cubs not run, but the mother ran over one of the cubs on the far right, literally ran over it, charging us. And so once I saw the bear break cover, that's when, and again, it was only for seconds, but that's when literally the only thought that hit my mind was, oh, this is going to be bad. Like it wasn't I didn't have a weapon on me at all. It was we're mauled. It wasn't maybe the bear is going to hit the raft. It was we're done. And again, thanks to Braun, I've had a couple situations where, experienced outfitters or guides have saved the day. And Braun, that's exactly what happened in this situation. I mean, had he not had that 500 Smith Wesson, had he not pulled it out in time, had he not fired, right in front of it, and made the right decision, on that, I can't imagine. I would have probably made a mistake in that situation because I was like, dude, I love bears as much as the next guy, but orphan those cubs, kill the bear, like please shoot the bear, and I think a lot of people would have made that mistake. But the fact that he decided to go with, I'm going to shoot in front of the bear and try and give this bear an option, you know what I mean? And try and turn it, because if I shoot it, and in his opinion, if I shoot that bear, she's protecting her cubs. And if she feels that hit, even if it's a fatal hit, she's going to die mauling us. And so that was another, there was so many things there that were interesting because I would have, honestly, I didn't have the experience to have made the right call, and he obviously did it. It worked. So I can question or think about it or say I would have done something else. But in that situation, he made the perfect call. And I think of how many times people would maybe do that wrong, or it wouldn't have worked out, or had we just been fly fishermen, or any kind of fishermen, or just people that just wanted to go hiking, that story would have turned out very different. Had somebody not had a weapon that they could get to immediately, you know what I mean? He was obviously smart enough to have that weapon in a situation, get to it immediately. There were a whole lot of things that he did that made that work out, where it could have gone south had it been another boat, had it been people that weren't ready, had it been a guy that made a different decision than he made. There's so many things that could have gone wrong.
When this bear starts coming, knocking its cub out of the way, coming through the water at you, did you have the thought come through your mind of, I'm dead?
Oh, well, there's been a couple times, and I'm sure you've been there, and I can only relate it to this when I think about different experiences. And sadly, how many times driving? Like, I'm sure there's been some times driving where, you've had one of those, where you're holding the wheel, or somebody's coming across the road towards you, or maybe you're hydroplaning. I mean, you've had that, right?
Jesus, take the wheel.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Most people have had situations driving where they can instantly think of that, that super tense, tight, freaked out, even if it's only for a couple seconds, that feeling of, this is how I'm going to die. Like, I'm not going to make it out of this right now. I'm going to die right here.
That helplessness. And
so that's the closest I could describe it to, as like somebody, if you're sliding on ice and you're going right to the semi, or, it's that couple seconds of, or you think you're going to flip your vehicles, the stuff that just happens in a split second. That's the closest I could relate it to was, this is it. You know what I mean? There's nothing I can do. I have zero control of this situation. I can't outrun the bear. I can't hide from the bear.
No,
I don't have a weapon to protect myself from the bear. I have zero options in this situation. That bear is going to dictate everything.
Jeez. So I want to come back to the bear story in a little bit, but
no problem, man.
We've talked about, you've had some crazy charges in Africa as well. I want to close the podcast out by finishing up with this one. So tell us about, was it a leopard you had charge you in Africa?
Yeah, there was so I just have this weird thing. I do love predators. I love apex predators because I just think they're awesome. I think they're smarter than most prey animals. I think they, you know what I mean? They think like we do in a lot of ways because they are predators. They've got to outsmart prey, and they're analyzing situations. They're literally thinking, you know what I mean? They're their eyes are in front of their face like ours are, because they're not worried about other predators. They're focused on one thing. And so I really wanted to go try and get a leopard. And so I went with Nico Lorenz in Zimbabwe, and I love hunting mountain lions and bobcats with hounds. I think it's fun. I've got some hounds that I love running, and it's a neat thing to do. And Nico was running leopards with hounds. And I was like, man, that sounds a couple of my favorite things, predator hunting and running leopards with hounds. That sounds great. So we went to Zimbabwe to do that. And this trip was twofold. There was a lot of things that were very, very crazy, but we went there and we were looking for leopard tracks and trying to figure out the freshest track. And we wanted a mature leopard and all this stuff. And it's very controlled, leopard hunting, as far as, they manage it, and they only allow a certain number of CITES tags for leopards to come out of the country. And we're at camp, and this guy had literally run a very long ways to come into camp and tell us that a leopard had killed a burro. And I'm trying to remember if the guy, he may have even gotten a phone call from somebody as well. But this guy shows up and is explaining to my outfitter that this burro has been killed in this village and by a huge leopard, and would we please come hunt it? So Nico's like, yep, sounds great. So he's like, let's go. We're loading up dogs and we take off to go to this village.
Now, well, what is a burro?
It's like a little mule.
Okay.
When you think of burros, like Jesus was on a burro. You know what I mean? Smaller mule. They usually have an X on their back. They always they talk about the cross. On the leather back. So think of a small mule or a very small horse for people that don't know what a burro actually is. That's
kind of what I thought you were going with. But I was like, I'm going to make sure because this is Africa. I'm not sure.
Oh, no. Good question. No problem. So what's interesting is this guy, and it's amazing how different people live and, how much we take for granted. But do you ever see the movie Ghost in the Darkness where they built the thorn brush all around it?
I don't think
maybe you did see that. So this guy lived in this little mud hut. And I mean, literally, he put mud up between little sticks, and his house was, and that was his house, but it was no bigger than an 8-foot square.
Yeah.
And he had sticks and mud, you know what I mean? And the flap was a piece of zebra hide or some type of animal hide. And outside that, to protect him and his burro from predators, there was thorn brush, probably about 4 to 5 foot high, but thorns, nasty thorns and brush around his little mud hut.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we got there, the man was very upset. What had happened is this leopard had jumped over the thorn brush. Now imagine you're lying on the dirt floor, and you hear a leopard kill your pet, your little animal that you use to make a living. Because him and this burro, he had a little cart. He would hook up the burro to the cart, and he would go out because they had burned all the firewood for pretty good proximity around the village. But he would take his burro and cart, go out and get firewood, bring it back to the village and trade it for chicken eggs and milk and, different things.
Wow.
So he had lost his way that he was making a living. So he was very upset, and he probably, also appreciated his burro, but it killed it right outside his little skin flap door. And then the crazy thing is it jumped over this 4-foot fence holding the burro. So it's probably a 400 to 550 pound burro, if I was to guess.
Jeez.
Jumped over it. Now that tells you how strong leopards are, and walked off with it. Because when we get there, we could see drag marks, literally drag marks where it carried this burro. And I'm like, holy chowder. So then the race is on. I mean, we are, we turn the hounds loose. The hounds go nuts. It's fresh track. Hounds take off. Well, we take off, and Nico says to me and Jake, my buddy that's videoing, he goes, listen, he said, if we run up on some elephants, they get poached a lot in this area, we need to scatter. Don't all run one way. You know what I mean? Just, it'll confuse themselves. Scatter. And we realize that as we're running through tons of elephant tracks. There's elephant tracks all over the place and in the mud and all this stuff. And so I'm like, what? And my cameraman, Jake, he looks at me, he goes, what? If we get charged by an elephant, just run through the brush? He goes, I have no idea where we are. I'll be lost forever. Someone will kill me. And he looks at me, he goes, I'm not splitting up, man. If an elephant charges us, he's going to be mad because I'm staying with you. And I said, well, he's going to be extra mad then because if an elephant charges, he's got the freaking rifle. I got a recurve bow. I'm running with him too. So,
God.
So he's going to be pretty pissed off if an elephant charges us. So you got all this stuff going on. Meanwhile, we're running after leopard, and he's like, keep your eyes out. Sometimes they charge you, and all this stuff. Well, the leopard ends up getting in tall grass. He bluff charges us. We can't even see it, but all of a sudden the dogs start running toward us, and you hear this, blood curdling, and we're freaking out, and you can't see in the tall grass. And finally, the leopard trees. Well, the leopard goes up in the tree, and I get close to getting him in the tree, but the leopard bails out of the tree, goes in the grass, and the dogs are fighting the leopard on the ground. So my buddy's like, all right, the PH, Nico, he's like, let's slip around and try and get a shot here. So I see a shot about 20, 25 yards, and I shoot, and I think I make a great shot because it's right behind the shoulder. Right here. The problem is, and I'll tell you what we found out later, but didn't realize at the time, the leopard was darting in and he's fighting dogs. Well, one of the times as he's turning, my arrow hit here, but it slid, not going through the lungs, it slid underneath the leopard's shoulder. So it didn't go through the lungs like we both thought when it hit. So the leopard's not really that hurt. He's very angry, but he's not really that hurt. So we come around expecting this leopard to go down any second. The dogs are fighting the leopard. Leopard's fighting back and forth. But buddy's like, man, he should be done. And all of a sudden the leopard looks up, and it's like the weirdest feeling. The only thing I can describe, it's like when that brown bear looked at me as it was running over the cub. That leopard literally looked right at me, like it's fighting dogs and it's doing this, and it goes like this, and it locks eyes, like boom. And as soon as it does that, Nico says he's going to charge. Very calmly, very matter of fact, get ready, he's going to charge. And I'm like, huh? And not a second later, and again, that's on YouTube too, but this leopard just lets out this blood curdling, just roar, and the dogs part like the Red Sea. They're like, have at them, we're good. The dogs open up, and this leopard full on charges me. And if you look into it, it's kind of crazy. And I don't know why this is, but they always say that like 90% of the time, leopards get the person that shoots them first. Like they get that person. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just because they're there or they're up front. I don't know why, but this leopard is coming right at me. The interesting thing is there were two PHs, and they both threw up. And I remember thinking, why aren't they shooting? Because this leopard's on us. Like, it's close. I wish I had paced it off, but I'm going to tell you, 8 feet, maybe 10 feet away, they both fire. One PH is actually backing up. He actually got laid off. He's backing up away and tries to shoot, and he completely misses the leopard. Nico shoots and hits the leopard. All 12 32 caliber buckshot pellets from his 12 gauge hit the leopard right in the head. What's interesting is the leopard was charging so fast coming, toward us. I always read Capstick and Rourke and all this crazy stuff about animals sliding, up to their feet. This leopard was coming hard. When he shot, the foot-pounds of energy of the buckshot hitting the leopard in the head drove its head down, and it flipped. So the tail and hind legs comes over, and it flips, and literally the leopard slides up, and the tail's right here, right at my feet.
Jeez.
And I'm backing up like, oh my gosh. And Nico was upset. And I found out later for multiple reasons. One, the other PH was backing up when he shot. He actually backed into my cameraman, or we'd have even better footage, but you could see the leopard charge and hear the shot. But he completely missed the leopard. Had Nico not shot at the right time. So there's been 2 times where, people have literally, guys that were more experienced, and that's why you go with an outfitter. I wouldn't just go to Africa and go like, yeah, I think I'm going to go hunt a leopard. I don't know anything about him. The fact that he kept his cool, and imagine being charged by a leopard and keeping your cool, but he's been charged by elephants, leopards, lions, a little bit of everything. So he was very calm and handled the situation great. And all I had for backup was my recurve. I mean, that's what I had. But, there's been some situations in the field that, like that leopard charge, or, I've had boats flip where I almost drowned. I've had all kinds of crazy situations, but a lot of it's because of the places I've been that lend themselves to dangerous situations. But that was another one where that leopard charge was pretty crazy.
Did you have kind of that same thought go through your mind that, as that leopard's charging you, having that same thought as whenever that bear's coming at y'all? Was that kind of that same Jesus take the wheel?
Oh, yeah, there was nothing I could do. I mean, again, it's a very uncomfortable situation to not have control. And I guess I didn't have control because a recurve in a charging situation, I mean, maybe in Fred Bear's hand it would be awesome. But for me, it was like, yeah, I got nothing. You know what I mean? Like, I even just trying to shoot at this leopard on charge, because it was like that, even, I don't even know if I'd have had the time to draw back. Cause I mean, those guys just had the time to throw up. And like I said, one guy was backing up when he shot, and the one PH completely missed the leopard, like didn't hit it with one pellet, completely missed it.
Jeez.
So had the other PH missed it, had Nico missed or made a bad shot, he said that leopard would have tore you up. He said it would have been unbelievable.
Jeez.
So yeah, so there's some of the the crazy exciting ones, because you go through all kinds of, and that's what's fun though, right? You can have a crazy experience falling out of a tree stand. There's all kinds of things that can happen. I've just had some pretty crazy situations where, animals or apex predators or things like that, if you hunt them enough and you're around them enough, especially when you're in close proximity, there's things that can go wrong for sure. And I've been very lucky. I've had a couple situations that, I probably should have been way more torn up than I was.
Hearing these stories, and then obviously, you've had some other encounters with, whether it's dangerous animals or like you're talking earlier about boats flipping and stuff like that. How have situations like these changed your outlook on life?
Wow, good point. So, I try and appreciate everything. I guess you try and appreciate everything, but it's also changed how I prepare, because it seems like so many times it's a tiny little thing, that makes all the difference in somebody losing their life. You know what I mean? Somebody taking off their seatbelt, or, you think of all the little tiny things, or, man, you look down at a text and, you went off the road and flipped your vehicle. So, a lot of people don't learn from that. Sadly, there's, probably, I don't know the statistics, but probably a lot of people every year that after they look at that text and flip their vehicle or impact somebody else's lives, they go, oh, if I would have just done this, if I'd have just done this a little different, if I'd have just thought about it, had I just been a little safer. So I guess when I think about how it's changed, things I do, I would say it's changed it as far as my trying to be prepared. You know what I mean? Doing the, either whether it's me carrying a handgun, I don't want to put somebody else's life in jeopardy, if you will. You know what I mean? If I can help somebody else, then that's great, or help myself. You know what I mean? And a lot of times, when you're in dangerous country, carrying a handgun is a good idea. When you're in a situation, because I even think of that, how bad would I have felt had Braun, been in that situation, maybe missed the bear, and the bear mauled me and then jumped on him or jumped on my cameraman. I would have felt unbelievably terrible. And then I not had any weapon to protect him. You know what I mean? Like that's, can you imagine just watching somebody slowly get mauled and going, man, if I would have just thought to have brought my handgun, but my ego caused me to not, because I just wanted to carry a recurve.
Yeah.
So it's changed, Will, you asked that, and yeah, it's changed as far as, do I have an exit strategy? I was stranded in Alaska one time because of a plane crash, and didn't have some of the equipment I needed there. I carry a satellite phone now. You know what I mean? Even if you rent one, yeah, it may cost a little bit, but if a couple buddies kick in, if you're going on a trip and 3 buddies all chip in, $200 a piece, you can rent a satellite phone for 2 weeks. Yeah. And I go, man, what's that worth to be able to call if somebody gets hurt or somebody has a heart attack? And as I've lost some friends and seen people get seriously hurt, outdoors, and been very close myself and been hurt myself, sometimes I realize that when you go to these remote locations, sometimes you can make all the difference in the world. You know what I mean? Yourself, or going with people that are also, are they prepared? What do you have in your pack? What are you bringing? What if this happens? So I guess I used to just always be that guy that's like, oh, there's nothing, it's going to be fine. What could happen? And now that I've seen, people that have appendicitis or been attacked by animals or bitten by animals or boats flipping or plane crashes or, vehicles, all the different things, heart attacks, all the different things that can happen. You go, how can I be better prepared to assist others if they have an issue, or assist myself and, and things like that. So great question. But that, yeah, I would probably say it's impacted me as far as what can I do, whether it's my kids I'm hunting with or some buddies or somebody else, what can I do to help them?
Gotcha. So I know we're running out of time here, and, we've talked about all these animal charges and crazy stories, and, you've boiled it down to preparedness and how the little things and how you can help others. But before we leave, kind of give the listeners, I know there's some out there that they might be going to Africa, they might be going to Alaska. How do you help them think about these things in the field, that if they ever find themselves in that situation, what would be your recommendation to them on how to potentially handle that and make it out alive?
So, great question, Will. And it comes down to preparedness, being prepared. And sometimes that preparedness, even includes talking to the outfitter. You know what I mean? A lot of hunters have been on outfitted hunts, whether you're a huge fan of outfitted hunts, like to go on yourself, by yourself most of the time, there's still going to be a situation if you're an avid hunter where there might be a species you want to go after, an area you want to go where you either don't have the time or it's illegal. A lot of the animals that I'm talking about, it was illegal for me to go by myself. Yeah. I can't hunt Alaska for brown bear, grizzly bear, polar bear, doll sheep, certain species I can't hunt without a guide or an outfitter. So talking to guides and outfitters, what's your plan for an emergency situation? Do you have a satellite phone? Do you have a first aid kit? You can't believe how many people don't have first aid kits with them now.
A proper one.
Right. And so, I think, I tell people and I encourage them, ask what their plan is. Do you have, like I work with the wilderness area and the Forest Service, and I literally have to supply them with an evac plan. Like, what's your evacuation plan if somebody has a heart attack or somebody gets injured up in the wilderness area, and it's we've got a horse trail here, we've got this, we've got satellite phones, we've got radios. This is how we would get somebody out. So make sure you're going with an outfitter, whether it's in this country or another, that you've talked to enough to know that they're trained in first aid or CPR. And here we have to be in Colorado. To be a guide, you have to be. Yeah. But in some places, that's not required. There's a scary number of states, even here in the U.S., where you don't have to have anything, man. You don't have to have, even though you're around people with bows, weapons, firearms, whatever, you don't have to have a first aid to be a guide. So I tell people, make sure you're, make sure you're going with somebody that's prepared, that, has what they need, has protocols in place in case something happens that you feel's experienced. And then don't ever trust somebody 100%. That's part of the equation, is going with somebody that you trust. But if you're going with your friends or going by yourself, do you have a first aid kit? Do you have a way to get out? Do you have a GPS? What if you're walking in the woods, or now a lot of cell phones have compasses where you can get a long lat, and you can get a bearing. But know how to work it. Know how to pull that up. Know how to screenshot that and send it to somebody if you need to. Tell somebody where you're at. Make sure you wear a safety harness when you're climbing up in a tree. And if you don't do it for you, wear it for the people that care about you. So there's so many little things now that I realize as I get older, and I've had situations where I was either hurt or seen people hurt. I realize a lot of times it's just not being prepared or making small decisions that can impact you in a big way. So that that would be the way I would answer that is, if you're going to go with somebody, make sure they're prepared, but don't leave all that responsibility up to somebody else. Even when I go with an outfitter now, I have food, extra water. I've got ways to treat water. If something happens, I've got, a simple first aid kit, so I can at least handle some things if they're not with me or if they don't have it, even if they've told me they do. I have a radio or a satellite phone or a GPS. I have things that I can figure out and take care of myself. I have extra clothes. There's a lot of little tiny things that can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. All little things that you never really think about that can have the biggest impact.
Yes, sir.
Great advice. Well, Fred, tell listeners where they can find you on social media, website, or anything. Where can they see you and learn more about you?
Well, I've got a Fred Eichler fan page on Instagram, Facebook. We've got Twitter, and then YouTube. Two of the stories I just told you about, people can find on my YouTube channel. They can look at that brown bear charge that I talked about. They can look at the leopard charge and a bunch of other stuff that we've got up, like foxes, that freak me out, or, all kinds of exciting stuff.
Sweet. Well, Fred, I really appreciate your time this morning and hopping on the HuntStand podcast with us and talking all these crazy stories and giving the listeners some advice.
Well, thanks. Well, I hope I didn't carry on too much. It's just, it's crazy. It brings you right back to the situation when you're talking about it.
Always good, man. We'll have to do it again.
All right, buddy.
All right, there you go, everybody. Another end to a new season to the HuntStand podcast. We're in season 2, and you got to hear about some crazy stories from Mr. Fred Eichler himself. If you want to see the video of the bear charging Fred and then the situation with the leopard, I'm going to put those down in the description below for this episode so you can see that craziness go down. I watched it myself, and it's quite interesting. Haven't got the picture of his leg getting torn up from the alligator yet, but I'm sure I will get that soon, and not so sure I'm going to share that with you guys out there, and I doubt Fred would want me to share it with you too, but either way, we just want to thank y'all for tuning in to the new season 2 of the HuntStand podcast, episode 1, and we hope that you're going to follow along with this wildest hunt stories, because we're going to have some stories from some pretty outstanding individuals that have gone through some things where they have found themselves in near-death scenarios, survival scenarios, and just some crazy encounters with some dangerous game. So if you don't want to miss out on that, make sure you follow, subscribe, do whatever you got to do to make sure you get notification for whenever we post each episode of HuntStand Podcast. If you haven't yet, download the HuntStand app. Thanks again for tuning into the HuntStand Podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.